Alright, guys, I want to say we're about to hop into a little reaction. The first things first, though, make sure you like that video, hit a little exit full screen, scroll a bit, like it, and then full screen it back up. You feel me? So the reason that we got another reaction today is honestly just because my day was busy. I was booked. I woke up at 6:30. I got home at about 6-ish. Put my rice in at 6:10. Just finished dinner. And I'm about to be on duty again as I'm an RA. So I'm about to be on call in the office from 8 to 11. So I didn't really have time. Like, I thought about listening to Proverbs and stuff, but at the same time, I was like, I don't want to rush it and nothing. So I didn't want to give you a half-baked video, even though technically all my reactions, I would say, are half-baked videos because the concepts are pretty low effort and low quality, if that makes sense. Because I don't know, I don't feel overly good about giving reactions. You know, I feel like that's just kind of like filler, you know, while I'm studying and trying to make quality is where the reactions came into play. And people with reaction channels, you know, sometimes they're funny, you know, but it takes a lot to make a good reaction video funny. But we know that the purpose of this channel is informative. So don't come over here looking for comedy. We're looking for information, right? So anyway, today's video is coming by way of Redeemed Zoomer. You know, obviously this is not me. Do it side by side. This is not me. This is not me. You trying to shove the square into the circle? Okay. All right. This anyway, to the point. All Bible translations explained in 7 minutes. You know, there's an influx. Is that the right word? Dang, maybe that is me. There is a huge copious amount, right? We'll use copious to prove that that's not me, right? That's a big triangle with a triangle square hole, or triangle with a triangle hole answer word. I'm making it worse. Anyway, there's so many Bible translations. How do you pick the right one? You know, there's always the people that's like, if it ain't KJV, there's no way. Like, what do you do instead of anything else? And, you know, I ain't gonna lie, I be looking at the KJV. You know, that's what we study on Blue Letter most of the time. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. But then there's also, I look at the other translations, right? When we read through it, originally we read it in the NIV. You know what I'm saying? I like the AMP because it breaks it down a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I like the NLT for some straight words, you know, straight common English I can digest with no further thoughts. But anyway, let's check out what my man here gotta say. Let's check it out.
This, but the Bible actually wasn't written in English. You might not know this, but the Bible actually wasn't written in English, nor was it written in any languages similar to English.
All right, so if that being us was the only distinction, was just not knowing that this was not written in English, then that should be none of us, right? If you didn't know the Bible wasn't written in English, man, that might as well be you. I'm sorry. Anyway, let's get back into it.
Rather, it was written in ancient languages that can be hard to translate. There's different decisions you could make when translating the Bible, and that's why there's so many translations of the Bible. For example, some translations are more literal, which means they try to translate word for word. But just because you have the same words doesn't mean you have the same meaning behind those words, so some translations try to translate the meaning by paraphrasing the text. So the literal ones are more true to the text, whereas the paraphrases might be more true to the meaning of the text. Sometimes there's debate over how to translate a certain text, so some translations will translate it so that it fits a Christian message better, whereas others will translate it based on what secular scholars think it means. So you can graph all the translations based on how literal they are, and based on how much they try to make the text align with Christian doctrine. The King James Version is that famous old version of the Bible from 1600s England, and historically it's been the most used version of the Bible ever. It's very beautiful and poetic, partly because of all the archaic language that it uses, but this also means it can be very hard to understand in certain places. So the King James Version is probably most useful if you're writing music or poetry, and the stereotypical users of it are those independent fundamental Baptists who take the Bible so literally they think there's only one true translation of it. Now, the new King James Version tries to renovate the castle of the old King James Version by rewriting it in modern language. So it tries to keep the poetic structure and beauty of the King James Version, while also making it more understandable to modern audiences. Another thing is that it makes a few changes to the KJV in light of modern scholarship. So it's probably most useful for pastors that are trying to lead a high church liturgy, and the stereotypical users of this are those trad guys who want to be traditional but are not actually traditional enough to understand traditional language. So the ESV, the the English Standard Version, is, well, very popular among evangelicals. This is because the translation committee for the ESV had a lot of prominent evangelical scholars and theologians. They made a study Bible to go along with it because it's a pretty literal translation, so they have a lot of notes that explain generic evangelical teachings. So this is why pastors will often recommend the ESV for their congregations to study on their own. So ESV is probably most useful for individual Bible study, and the stereotypical users of it are those Christian ladies that are obsessed with coloring and marking up and highlighting their Bibles just as much as those 20 highlighter girls from school will color their class notes. The New International Version tries to be a balance between a literal translation and a paraphrase translation. The literal ones can be a bit hard to understand in some places, but the paraphrases can make the Bible not quite sound like the Bible, so the NIV tries to be easy to understand while still sounding like the Bible. This is why it's so popular, because it's easy to understand. So it's probably most useful for a pastor preaching a sermon to a large congregation, because everyone's going to be able to understand it. And the stereotypical users of this one are guys who want to read the Bible but don't have the greatest reading comprehension skills. The Christian Standard Bible also tries to have a balance between a literal and a paraphrase translation. However, the difference between this one and the NIV is the NIV uses more Christianese, more theological language, whereas the CSB tries to use more common language for people who are not as familiar with Christian terms. So the CSB is probably most useful for people that are handing out Bibles in public, and the stereotypical user of this one is probably your average friendly neighborhood Baptist pastor. The NASB is a very literal translation, and the translators explicitly laid out their priorities when translating it. One of them is that it gives Jesus Christ his proper place, so that means this is a very explicitly Christian translation as well, and it's very popular among conservatives and fundamentalists for that reason. And so this is probably most useful for people who are already strong in their faith having a Bible study together or something, and the stereotypical users of this are people who treat John MacArthur like the Pope. Now, the NRSV is the complete opposite, because it's a secular translation, meaning it has no Christian agenda or theology behind it. It's an updated version of the RSV, which was an updated version of the ASV, which was an updated version of the old KJV, and for each of these updates they factored in new developments in Bible scholarship. This is considered the most scholarly translation, so it's most useful for those seriously studying the Bible in an academic setting, and the stereotypical users of this one are probably liberal mainline Protestants. The New Living Translation is one of those paraphrase translations that tries to be very engaging and dynamic. It's a much more free translation than something like the ESV, for example, and it tries to flow smoothly like a stream. It's most useful for a Bible study made up of Christians who are new to their faith, and the stereotypical user of this one is honestly a popular Christian bookstore salesman. The Good News Translation is another one of the paraphrases, but it's specifically designed for children and those who didn't grow up speaking English, so that it can share the good news with everyone. So it avoids using any weird figures of speech or confusing language. It tries to be very straightforward without simplifying the text in any way. So it's probably most useful for people going on a mission trip around the world, and the stereotypical user of this one is a Sunday school teacher. And now it's time for the message. In case you're not familiar with this one, it's got a reputation for being kinda silly. It's seen as more of a commentary than a translation anyway, especially because much of it is like this. Yes, this is actually the Bible, supposedly. The whole thing is one guy's interpretation of the Bible. It's all done by a Presbyterian minister named Eugene Peterson, and he was actually a really smart guy, so it still could be useful if you're really struggling to understand a certain passage and you want a second opinion. And the stereotypical user of this is a slightly liberal, lighthearted boomer, I guess. Now enjoy this bruh compilation of various parts of the message. So there's a lot of translations that could be used many ways by many different types of people. But in all of these translations, the message, no not you, the message is the same. The entire Bible is the unfolding of the story about Jesus Christ.
I'm honestly kind of sad it didn't talk about the AMP. You know, I actually like to reference that one because it also seems to be a study Bible. Like, it's got the important stuff that I struggle with, usually in parentheses. So I don't know what it says about me, and I think honestly that might be for the best. But other than that, I really be on the KJV type junk. Just because I'm like, everybody back in the day used to use it, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. One, but two, like, that was the time where people were closer to Jesus than nowadays, right? Obviously, we got smarter as a people, but I'm with that old way of thinking. I'm not gonna lie. Like, when people talk about all the complications with the world today, I'm like, we wouldn't really have that back then. But then their excuse is something like, oh, but people back then used to die in their 60s. Like, all right, so it says in England, the average lifespan at birth varied between 35 and 40 years, which is a little bit lower than I originally thought. You know, I thought it was like maybe the 50s, the 60s. I thought we only boosted it by like 10 years, but apparently these people were dying before they even hit 50. Regardless, you know, something about it was simpler, right? You had to care more about your faith because you knew you actually didn't have much time. This was back, this is literally almost half the life expectancy we have today. It's like 75 now. Theirs was 35. Actually, that's less than half. Think about that. These people were living less than a half as long as we're living today, meaning their faith had to be rock solid. Their faith had to have been tested and everything like that. You know what I'm saying? They didn't have time, like, push Jesus out. Like, no, you ain't got time like that. Come on, I'm 20 right now. I'd be over half my life over already. Ain't be no time for no. Oh, I can sin so grace can abound. Like no, no. So yeah, I rock with the KJV. You know what I'm saying? And honestly, if we kept our modern inventions, some of them, like the good stuff like medicine, dental care, and all that crap, and we took away stuff like guns and most things that need electric. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't want to say it's better, because I'm trying to think of how bad my teeth would be aching because they didn't brush their teeth properly. You know what I'm saying? That's the stuff I think about. I don't really care that I'm dying at 40. I care about, dang, how many cavities am I really about to have? But also, it doesn't even matter for real. You about to die anyway. But that's not the point. The point is, you got so much time nowadays. Well, on average. But Jesus is still there. You still gotta act like lock in time. You know what I'm saying? Nobody knows the hour of the time. People may say whatever they want, but nobody knows. Therefore, we really have to keep strong in our faith. All right, that's gonna be the end of the video. Hope you guys have yourselves fantastic rest of your day. Peace.